Hey guys, this is Kaylin from Hydrangea Treehouse. I hope you are doing really well. So today I want to share with you guys how to build a workbench to enhance your future DIY experience. First of all, this project is really simple. It only uses 2x4s and some plywood. Also, it's pretty forgiving. The main goal is to create a flat surface for your table saw and a tabletop, so it doesn't have to be very accurate. I actually have used a lot ever since I built it. It's a type of DIY project that will enhance your future DIY experience. By the way, I'll have a written post which I'll link in the description with step-by-step instructions and all my measurements. So check it out if you're interested to give this project a try. And now let's get started. Here's what the finished workbench looks like. On the lower table, we'll put our portable table saw so that we can use it as a table saw bench. I designed this workbench and my husband and I built this together. First of all, let's start with the base. So we're starting off with building this rectangle shape with the center reinforced. I'm using the pocket jig to join the 2x4s together, and that's because I don't want to have screws getting in the way as I'm gonna attach more boards to this structure. But you can use L brackets or just countersink the screws so they won't get in the way. And we did find it easier to attach the screws when we are placing them vertically. And a quick tip for keeping track of your cut list. I like to write everything down about how long each board is and how many I need, and then just scratch them off once I finish cutting. And here I'm marking the position of the braces for this bottom structure. This really depends on how large you want the island for your table saw to be. And once I decided on the location, I just attached them to the long rectangle. The reason I'm putting a board under this is because my patio floor is not very even, so I'm just placing a 2x4 on the bottom to create an even surface for attaching the screws. And now let's build some vertical boards to support the height. I'm using 2x4 pieces in total. So just cut them to length with a miter saw, and then I'm attaching them to the rectangle base. Because the surface these two boards contact each other is pretty large, I didn't bother with pocket screws, and also this is the outermost layer, so that even though the screws stick out, that's totally fine with me. And we'll just continue attach those 2x4 boards until we finish all 8 of them with the same process. Once we finish adding all the vertical boards, it's time to create 2 rectangle structures to support the tabletop. And the way we build them is really similar to building the bottom platform. For the larger tabletop, we're using a different method by applying those 2x4s on the outer layer of those vertical boards and then attaching them with screws. And here is what it looks like so far. And now the structure is built, let's add the tabletop. For the tabletop, I'm using 3/4 inch of plywood. We bought them from Home Depot, and we had the store to cut them for us so that they can fit inside the SUV since we don't own a truck. Once we brought the plywood boards home, we just cut them on top of a workbench, which is very much a work in progress, but they work pretty well. And we cut it to size and placing them on top of the surface. We're leaving about 1/2 inch to 1 inch on all 4 sides just to have a little bit overhang. And we found it to be easier to cut them with a circular saw in this case, as they are sitting on top of the workbench. The edge can be quite rough after cutting for plywood, so I'm just sanding it off. And by the way, where there are 2 2x4 boards are butting against each other, I am adding a metal hardware and attach them to the 2x4s. To attach the tabletop to the workbench, I'm trying to make it removable so that in the future, if my tabletop gets damaged, I can easily replace them. I'm using a combination of a bunch of L brackets. Some I bought for this project, others are just leftovers from previous DIY projects or IKEA furnitures. So the way we do it is to just place the plywood on the 2x4 structure we have built and then use the L brackets to attach them.
When you are attaching the plywood, make sure to not drive too deep since it's only 3/4 inch, and then just attach the screws to it, and it works pretty well. I also like how it makes it easier to replace the surface in the future. For the table saw portion of this workbench, because it's quite low, it's harder to attach L brackets while the plywood is on top, which is why I'm just using a scrap piece of furniture so I can secure one direction of the L brackets, and later once we finish cutting the plywood to size, we'll just attach it to this by driving the screws towards the plywood. At this moment, I was sitting on top of the plywood just to apply pressures to help my husband attaching the screws. And once that's done, we can add a table saw, which is super exciting. It is also the moment of truth whether your table saw surface is slightly higher than the workbench, which is ideal so that whatever you are cutting, they can fall naturally to the workbench without getting stuck. But if your tabletop is slightly higher than the table saw, that is fine, just adding things to the bottom to shim it up. I like to use metal plates or just wood boards to prop them up if that happens. So now we're cutting a piece of plywood to add to the bottom surface of this workbench. This is optional, but we really want to add a shelf on the bottom so we can store random stuff or just scrap pieces from the projects, because the more storage, the better. To save costs for this DIY project, we bought a cheaper plywood for the bottom shelf because it's not gonna be seen as much. Also, we're just gonna use it to store raw materials. To attach the plywood to the bottom shelf, we use a different method, which is just tapping brad nails into the frame, which is pretty simple and quick. And now the basic structure is done, and it's time to add the casters and the leveler. Here is what I'm using. On the left is a caster, which is heavy duty, and on the right is a leveler, which is gonna be really helpful if I want the tabletop to be leveled for certain projects. So I'm just moving them around to test out locations. Once I'm sure, I just drive screws to attach them. I'm installing the leveler first and then the casters. For the heavy-duty casters, it came with a template, so I was kind of playing around with the template, just making sure the height works really well, then just attach them. So basically using the same method of driving a pilot hole and then attaching it with screws. Once I attach the bracket to the workbench, I just popped in the wheel. And now it comes to the moment of truth of whether they are working well. The wheels are turning smoothly, which will make it really easy to take out this workbench from our garage. And now comes the last step, which is finish the surface of the tabletop. I'm using a water-based poly. They dry really quickly, and I have applied 3 coats in total. I think applying a protective finish is optional for this project, but I do like to add poly just to increase the durability of it. And you can see how smooth the surface is. I'm really happy. When you're shopping for the tabletop materials, make sure to get a high-quality plywood so they can last for a longer time and create a super smooth surface for your future projects. And also consider the wood finish. So for my case, I'm using red oak because red oak is hardwood, which usually creates a more sturdy, scratch-resistant surface compared to softwood like pine. So once that's done, it's finally the time for the table saw to move into its new space. And we are really happy with how this project turned out. I like how easy it is to move the workbench, especially as a small girl. I'm not really strong, so the wheel definitely helps. Whenever I need the tabletop to stay still, I just prop up the cover so that the wheel can slide to the sides, which is really secure and not removable. And whenever I want to adjust the level, I can easily turn the leveler, which I find it really helpful.
Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this DIY tutorial, and make sure to check out the description box for written instructions as well. If you do like this video, leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time. Bye.